Hello.
Hello.
It's
How's it
Monday
going?
again. Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning. Welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages people, projects, or processes for a living. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I explore project topics from the perspective of what not to do. It just makes me want to say it like the old people, like of what not to do. In each episode, we talk about some common pitfalls. We share some personal stories. Got some good stories for today, Sharon, and experiences, and we explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
Yep. And in this episode, we're going to talk about underestimating project costs and making the mistake of pretending that the money isn't moving.
Yeah, we've all experienced this at some point in our careers, and a manager that is trying to pull the wool over people's eyes about the state of those cost overruns, as if we won't find out, or as if we don't already know what's going on.
Look over that way. Just go. Pay attention.
Yeah,
It's a sparkly thing over here. It's also really a sign of a really poorly run project if you as the manager don't feel like you can have open, truthful, honest conversations about the state of things. Like I always find, like, whenever you're talking to somebody, if you try to bring up money as a topic and anybody tries to run around that or not be honest or not be truthful about it, if you're hiding this, like, what else are you hiding? What else are you not being honest about? It drives me insane.
Yeah, I mean, again, especially if you're trying to hide this from upper management, no, that's the wrong approach.
Yeah.
That you will have some serious trust issues after that. I mean, I say this time and time again, Sharon. You need to approach from a clinical perspective.
Yep.
I share the facts. You rip off the Band-Aid, with your approach. It's time for you to come together, to stop being nice and start being real.
Did you just quote MTV's Real World?
Maybe, Sharon. It doesn't matter. Truth is truth. That's why with every episode, we go into the house. We talk to all the people that live here in the house.
No, wrong show. There's nobody in the house. Nobody's in this house.
I know. I do still want to have that MTV Real World, like that booth where we could be like here talking, like switch cameras, and suddenly like I'm in like a beanbag chair sitting back, be like, what really just kind of brought me down today is what Sharon was saying about projects. Like, it just got me thinking, what could have changed in my life?
Yes.
I guess I could just have a digital background and do that, but have some little intro, some animation thing to go to this view where we're both now in the truth box.
Now we need a new show. There you go.
I don't. No, it just needs to be a segment of this series, Sharon. Seriously, let's have the same similar background that shows that we're in the space. All right, I'm going to share a truth now about this. But as always, comment, please feel free to share your experiences, any examples or feedback that we may have missed, any other ideas for other episodes, because we have a lot of ideas. Do we have all the ideas?
And how you really feel about us having a truth segment.
Yes, I like it. But yeah.
Okay, let's get started with this show and talk about some definitions.
Yeah, I mean, I think of this, pure and simple, is that you have a project. At the beginning of the project, you as a project manager, you control, like, you have management of ownership of time, budget, and resources. Those are the three pieces that you can move around. Yep. So if you're not being honest and open about where things are, and this is, I don't know if this is, you have this perspective, Sharon, where I'd say, like, look, it's not like it's my money, my project. I'm guiding this.
Yep.
I'm the captain of the ship of this project. Yep. Going through. It's like, but it's not that I had cost overruns,
right,
necessarily. I mean, depending on the tasks and the ownership there, but it may be that maybe we scoped it out and we were just way off. Yep. That we didn't do in-depth enough discovery to understand how is this really going to play out? And what are those cost factors that could drive it up?
Yeah, and I think, so this can be bad. There's ways you can do this in positive ways and negative ways, both directions. And I think, if you really want to get like really open and honest about this topic, a lot of people like to drag in their personal feelings around finance whenever you're looking at, managing budget for another company. And small companies also deal with this different than large companies. So I think, it's almost like what I have found is like the larger the company, the less people like really connect with that being real dollars. But in a small company, sometimes people take it a little too personally and they don't think about that as being, this is the project and this is business and these are numbers, as opposed to it's personally associated with them. So I think what ends up happening is, whenever you're conversing about this, is how do you think about that project and the stuff that's associated with it? And if you're not correlating those finances to making the project happen and then looking at those numbers, like you said, in a clinical way to say, okay, you don't think personally about time. You don't think about, oh, well, I need to, I'm just going to, put on as much time as possible. Like you think about that more realistically because time is more tangible. But when we look at finances across the budget, it's like you have to literally break them out, look and see how much you have, keep track of them, put it in whatever tool you're using to manage it. And then you need to think about it in terms of how does that align with the overall project, not, it's just something that needs to be done all the way to, you're tying it too tightly to yourself. I think it's finding a happy place that is clinical, but also where you're taking some level of ownership for making sure that it's getting done correctly.
I know that there are a lot of large enterprises here in the role. Like, this is my job. I was assigned the project. So I don't think about the budget aspects of that unless there are third-party tools or outside vendors that you're paying for. But as smaller consultants, like as an independent, you've got you with your company. I mean, there's a lot of things to factor in that are tied directly to the scope. And that's why that initial scope of work is so critical to that.
Yes.
Because you have buckets of funds for specific activities.
Right.
And so where there are, and sometimes you can play a little bit with those dollars and say, hey, we did this piece a lot quicker.
Yep.
We were able to leverage other past projects. And so that was half what we budgeted for. Good, because we have overruns in other areas where we can go and apply that to. And so that's part of your job as the owner of a consulting company, go and do that.
Yep.
But it also means that where I like work with clients as an independent, where I say, like, this is what you funded. Like, I don't do time and cost. I should say
time and materials.
I do time and materials. I do. I do some around that. What it's usually, I do it around campaigns, around a body of deliverables. Like, I don't do a fixed cost per se. I say, this is what I estimate for this campaign. I don't just like, here's an hourly rate to go and do those things. So if I do it faster, like they agree to it, they sign onto that. If I'm able to do it in half the time, because I was able to automate something and do something, like, then it's more profit to me for that. I don't then go back, hey, it cost me half that, only pay me half. Like, no, this is our agreement. You signed up for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other painful side of a small business is invoicing out and waiting. Now you're waiting to pay people that work for you or yourself, waiting for those invoices to be paid.
Yes.
So that's always a rough one.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I think, we're going to talk about this a lot, but it's just being honest and open about where you're at and what's going on, and keeping track of things. And I think, we talk about budget overruns. I think one of the struggles sometimes is if you're not having those conversations and you're not, keeping track of things, or you're just, and I think it said it in like the intro to this, but like, if you're just going off a gut feel, I don't know. Even on the personal side of things, I don't know how many people manage their checkbook by a gut feel. It's probably not going to work out very well for them.
That's why I love with project reporting of being very clinical. I always talk about the 4-blocker format, just like, and I know with like that you use in your business, like the project status, it does some of the same things, color coded, red, green, yellow, status of. And you have that minimal, a weekly update of that. So, and then if there's a risk that pops up or some unforeseen cost, or, hey, we found this and it's going to impact this. I mean, you share that immediately with the client. But this is where I guess the what not to do is, if you're not providing that regular, if you don't have that forum to bring up constantly, here are the risks. We knew this. This way, this one we're doing fine. This other project, we're going south here. The risk is happening.
Yep.
We've got the plan. Here's what's going on. But now this is why costs are going up. It's this phase of the project is still ongoing because of these reasons. You need to be having those kinds of conversations, sometimes very difficult conversations with your stakeholders.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I think, as we kind of move into talking about the impacts of this, as that kind of goes from definitions to impacts. If you're not having those conversations regularly, if you're not keeping track of that, that can cause loss of trust across the board, because if you're having those conversations on a regular basis and something happens, then people are like, oh, okay, well, you did say that could potentially happen. And it's we can absorb a small risk, a small, misalignment. But what you can't do is just not say anything and not say anything and not say anything and not say anything and not say anything. And then one day it's like, wait, what just happened? Like, where did that come out of? Right.
You know what that reminds me of, Sharon, is like the whole annual review, the 360-degree reviews and stuff, where again, if you're not having conversations with your people, with your team in real time, and then suddenly, and they think everything's going great, and then suddenly it's your mid-year review or end-of-year review, and you hit them with all this negative stuff of like, and this went wrong. It's like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
Why were you not talking to me about this, where I could have reversed course on that and not made it worse? And that's another, I would say, one of my pet peeves. It's a clear sign of a crappy manager.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just don't do that to your people either. Go and have, like, I had a woman working for me who would get very emotional around like the bad news, and I just kept saying, hey, look, this is like, it's the project, it's not you,
right?
It's like the luck of the draw at the project, and had these issues, and you like stay on top of this way. It's like, well, the internal client's angry, and I'm like, look, that's gonna happen. You need to toughen up about that. But I said,
just keep swimming.
You need to be asking yourself the question, like, did I raise the issues? Yes. Right. Did I speak up about this? Did I include it in my risk analysis? Was it in my weekly reporting? Yes, and yes. Okay. You've done everything you could do.
Job.
Right. And then you should be able to sleep easily. Like, how do you, Sharon, how do you kind of balance that of the, the people that are, I hate going in the whole phrase of doing more with less. Like, we've got to suck it up. We had to let some people go. We had a riff here, and now we've got to pick up the slack. We're just thankful to have jobs, like kind of attitudes, where a lot of times it's because organizations are not being realistic about what things cost, how long time it takes around these tasks. Balancing that from a cultural standpoint, keep people motivated, versus balancing these things which are out of our control. I mean, I don't know if you have any techniques of ways of working with people.
I mean, I've been in tech for 30 years, so this is nothing new, right? There's always seasons where somebody wants more than you expected, or things run long, or things you run into issues or roadblocks or whatever, or in this case, we're talking about money, like somebody managed or didn't project or didn't forecast properly or didn't keep track of things properly. And so what ends up happening is people really just end up kind of having to eat it at the end, right? And I try hard not to have that happen. Like, I've spent a lot of time and energy really trying to figure out how can we get our heads around things? How can we plan? And I'm going to be really honest. I mean, the right answer is to plan, right? Plan as much as you possibly can. But I did have a really nice manager one time that said, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, 1,000 years ago, right? When's the second best time to plant a tree?
Now. Yes.
right now. So what I think my strategy when it comes to this is obviously as much as humanly possible, plan, project, forecast, manage, do your best to get your hands around things so that things don't get out of control. Like you said, bring up risks, deal with them as quickly as you can. But the second best thing that you can do is just know that sometimes today is the best time to do it. And so, you take on what you can do, you look at everything for what it is, you sit down, make a list of everything. Say, okay, where are we behind? What do we need to catch up? What do we need to prioritize? And I think one of the important things to remember is that, especially since we're talking about work, right? Nobody's dying on the table, guys. This is technology. So be reasonable about how much time you can actually work before you kind of, are cutting into, physical and emotional health, and be like, okay, what do we need to do? How can we prioritize that? How can we keep our sanity and still kind of get things caught up, and maintain that distance of, like you said, clinical, looking at the project as a project and not letting that kind of like ruin our day to day. I have a really great story about this. So when I was 18, I worked in a retail pharmacy at the very beginning of my career. And here I was green, I'm like working at this 24-hour pharmacy. And I was.
What are these pills? I don't know. Let me taste some. Let me try some of this.
My job was to take the prescription and enter them into the system. I was not dealing with the pills. But I would take, work with people, and my job was to take the prescriptions, enter them in, and then to check them out at the end. And so I did this, my whole job. And I got to the point where, like, because it's a 24-hour pharmacy, like the line never stopped, right? It was just always going 24 hours a day.
I have to say that I am amazed when I go to a couple of the pharmacies that here locally, that it's like that all day long. Like, wow, I could not do that like that. I could not do that.
This was a really large pharmacy. It was very centrally located. It was a big one, and it was 24 hours. So like it just never stopped. And so I would just stand there and I would just keep doing my job. And then I was like, my shift was over, but I'm like, well, for whatever reason, everybody was busy. They were shorthanded. I was always, I'll just stick around a little while. And what's really interesting is early in my career, I had a manager, a really great manager that took me aside. And she said to me, she's like, Sharon, I really appreciate that, you're here to build up your team, but your shift is over. And I'm like, right, but like, there's still a line of 50 people. She goes, there will be a line of 50 people, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for as long as this business is open. When your shift is over, you need to say thank you, and you need to grab your stuff, and you need to go home. And I really appreciate that guidance so young and so early, because it, from that point on, really like something triggered in my brain. And at the end of the day, I wrap up what I'm doing. I clinically kind of cut that line and say, all right, we're putting a hold on this. I'm going to go have my personal life. And then when I'm going to come back, that line is still going to be there. And I think you have to think about that with projects is, yeah, it gets busy. Yeah, it gets crazy. Yeah, you've got people who are like breathing down your neck. In this case, in a retail pharmacy, we had sick people who their insurance wouldn't work half the time. I promise you, in technology, it's not going to be nearly as bad as somebody that's sick wanting their medicine. And so I've really learned to kind of disconnect and say, okay, we're going to prioritize this. We're going to do as much as we can in the time that we've got. But like at some point I have to go home and eat dinner and relax and rest and find that balance.
Sharon, I had a very similar experience. The first tech company that I worked for, my manager, so the owner of the company, Steve Hargadon. So he's in the education space now, but said the exact same thing. Like, I'm working late on Friday. Everything's closing down. I had a key. I could lock up the door. He's just like, what are you doing? I'm like, this stuff needs to get done. He's like, no, like working at Monday. I'm like, oh, this stuff needs to go out. And he said the same guidance. He's like, look, there's always going to be more work. He says, either you have too many things on your plate, or we need another person here, or we need to better prioritize these. Like the answer is not, like, he knew. He's like, you've got a wife and a baby at home. Like, go home. Go be with your family. That's more important than anything here. Just don't stress out about it. We'll see on Monday. We'll go through and we'll review stuff. If we need to push back the delivery of, like, we had a marketing campaign going out. It says, we'll delay it a day. Like, we'll figure it out, but this is not the right answer. It was just a really great lesson there that I've ignored a good portion of my my career too. But
But
yeah,
those were good managers. Those were good
yeah.
managers that were managing their costs and managing their resources and making sure that we left when we were supposed to
And
leave.
thinking about the cultural impacts of these things again. So, I mean, everything we're talking about, I mean, the pitfalls, like what happens when you ignore like these types
Don't
of
let
things.
your people work 40 hours a day, guys.
Well,
Like,
you're going to
that's not
burn
okay.
through, right? You're going to burn through people around that. But this is why it's also important. It goes back to what we always talk about, having a structure in place,
Yes.
having governance for the management of your projects, your time, having a structure to these things. If I know that, hey, I'm doing status reports every Monday morning, they go out by the end of day Monday for the rest of it, or if I prepare them on Friday to be reviewed for Monday, whatever the time frame is, this is when I do this work, this body of work, block that out. Everyone knows I need 4 or 5 hours on this day to do this activity to get these done, where we're tracking each one. You go through your checklist of questions. How are we on people? How are we on budget? How are we on risk? How are we on culture? I mean, it's great to ask that, to know, to recognize, to program yourself to ask those questions and make it part of that system. And you will better identify. It'll allow you to be clinical in your approach to each of these different things. You go in, you never withhold the fact that you can even put your gut feel of, hey, there might be a cost overrun. I just don't feel that this is going the right way. My confidence level, there's ways to word that. My confidence level is low that this right now, it looks good from the surface, but my confidence level is low on this timeline because of these risks, these factors.
Yep.
So with finances, especially, you even if you're internal, if it's all funny money moving between departments.
Yeah, but you can't pretend. You can't pretend, because it's not my money, because it's not money that matters to me. Like, you can't just ignore it and go, whatever, it'll all work itself out.
Honestly, it would, even if you're in a large company where, again, you're not doing that kind of budgeting, again, unless there's tools or outside vendors or other costs.
Right.
But you are a cost center. It is good to be aware of, and you can even run a high level number and have those conversations with your management, with your stakeholders, and say, here's the people, here's the average salary, here's what this is costing us the time. If you're proactive, that will be a shiny, button on your lapel for, like, people will love the fact that you're looking at it, approaching it that way, and thinking about how much we're spending, how much we're overrun of this project, and have a cost model in place. So there's, again, lots of data out there to guide you on that process, but having structure, being aware of the cultural impacts. These things are critical, whether they're part of the methodology, whether they're what your manager is asking for or not. You should be doing these things.
Yeah, what not to do. Don't add it up at the end of the project and see how you did without any planning. Just tell everybody they have to work as hard as they can possibly work, and do anything and everything, no matter what, with no management or oversight.
Yeah.
Ignore it all. Just ignore it all. It'll all be fine.
But that should also be part of when you're going through for the kickoff and talking about with your stakeholders, and say, okay, what is our responsibility for a financial overview of this project? Again, if you're working internally in these internal projects, maybe that isn't a factor, but the fact that you bring it up and ask that question, I think you'd be surprised. Some of the stakeholders I would like to track and be aware of how many people, how long, that we have some estimates so that we have an idea, like, what would this cost us if we went outside to do this? Could we do it cheaper by hiring an outside consulting group to do it next time versus us? Where are we spending our time the most wisely?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that people don't really think about, when it comes to budget and finances is, like you said, maybe you're not responsible for the budget itself, but there are, things that eventually will get hit by that. One of the places that I came into a long time ago, I worked for a consulting company, and I came in and kind of led up a very large project, and they gave me the statement of work, and it was a governmental thing that was with multiple states. And they were like, yeah, here's the agreement, read it, and then do your job. And it was like 1,000 pages. And by the way, this is before AI or screen readers or summarization. I literally had to read the whole thing. So I printed it all out. I took my trusty highlighter and I went through it to look and see, like, what do I need to know about this? And one of the things that nobody had really talked about was the fact that there was a lot of fines. So if deliverables were past a certain date, if things didn't get done in a certain way, if there was certain status reporting that was required in a certain format, and if it didn't get delivered that way on a certain timeline to certain people. So there was basically an entire section of this entire contract that defined what all those fines were. And I just got out my little handy spreadsheet and said, well, I know that we're not doing this. And I, because I knew where we were at in the project when they hired me in. And I started adding up how much those fines were. And I went back to the overall project manager and basically said, look, not only do we need to do this, this, and this, but there's a whole section of fines. And I would prioritize some of this stuff because there are really easy ways for us to very quickly shift the balance of what's happening from a financial standpoint if we just simply start doing these things so that we're not getting these fines. And so I think, we think about project management, we think about managing stuff. There's the day-to-day stuff, there's the ongoing stuff, but be aware, I think, this is kind of what you're trying to say. Be aware of all those other hidden costs that are baked into every single project that you're doing. And it's things like, are you doing burdensome meetings that are expensive? Are there any penalties or fines associated with your project? Are there any discounts for maybe completing early? And maybe they're trying to run you a little bit harder, not because they're trying to work you to death, but because if you finish before a certain date, there's a very significant, bonus that your team is going to get. So I think there's a lot of hidden costs that people don't really think about when you're managing or participating in a project that you should be at least thinking, know that it's there.
Well, thinking about strategies, how do you overcome this issue? I think we both kind of talked around this, having that structure. So one, understanding the constraints for any project, hey, we must have these, we have to have a weekly budget review. We have to go through and provide this in this format, as you just
always have a checkpoint. Always.
You have that checkpoint. Now, is when you're working with a client and scoping that out, if you have a process, a method, and a weekly for this, and to get them and what they're asking for, if they're asking for something that's outside, they want it every Wednesday instead of Monday. And if you go and say, well, look, we have this structure in the work. Could we provide it to you on Mondays instead of Wednesdays so that it fits in with all of the other projects we do? So again, you can have those discussions up front. But specifically around finance, I mean, it should be part of that regular review. Maybe your burn rate of the buckets of was your scope accurate in here was going to be our discovery, our design phase, the testing. I know the running joke working in tech for so long was always that when all the cost overruns happen on that side, what happens? Where's the dollar? Where's the money come from? Funds get pulled from testing. Funds get pulled from user adoptions. They get pulled from marketing. All these different areas. Yeah. There's a lot of different areas. Okay, you poorly scoped out what this would take to go and do. But if you're having those,
now you know why all tech companies have cold water. It got pulled from the gas bill, guys.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So you can again, you need to adjust your forecasting model for future projects, but make this part of the way that you deliver, normalize the discussions around finance to say, here's where we are, here's how we're burning against, we're ahead of schedule, we're burning faster or we're burning slower. If we stay at this pace, we may have some additional funds that we can move around with, stay within it. There's always going to be cost overruns and decisions to be made about those things to stay on budget. But it'll be harder and harder to have those discussions, more difficult discussions, if you don't have those checkpoints. That it just comes down to that.
I agree. And another thing that I want to add too, especially if you have junior or lower level members of your team that maybe don't have that experience level, by being more transparent with them and helping them to understand how those budgets work and how the numbers work and how the costs impact them. Two things happen. One, I think they take more ownership over the roles that they have because they see how they fit into the equation. And two, you're providing them a really good opportunity to train up so that in the future, they can take that knowledge and potentially run their projects even better or participate in projects with a higher level of stewardship than if you kind of keep it away from them. And I think of it that's like parenting, right? When you raise your kids understanding what finances are and how finances work, they tend to become pretty decent people when they grow up managing their own finances. But if you hide the finances from them and you say, oh no, kids don't need to be part of that, those are the people who I really feel like don't know how to manage their finances. So I'm going to say the same thing in business. If you think that nobody should know what's going on financially within the project because that's limited to the managers or the project managers or whatever, I think you're missing a really great opportunity for leadership and for training for people to become part of that.
Right, because some of those junior folks, they may not care. They see their role is different. I mean, others, they want to be aware of that to better understand, and those are like the future leaders that'll move up. I mean, everybody starts somewhere, and so you want to provide that guidance. Because my philosophy with my wife raising our kids was exactly the same. Like, we would talk about the cost of things, so they'd understand that. If we went and had a really nice vacation, like we did one with the kids were little and all 6 of us went to Hawaii for a week. And, we talked about like the cost of these different things and what that meant that we can't do because we saved up and, and spent that money there versus other things and made a decision as a family of where we wanted to go. We had an opportunity to go back to Hawaii again. We would go all the time to Hawaii, but, it was, I make it sound like casual, like we just were in Hawaii all the time. No, it's because my in-laws had a timeshare for years. And so it was dramatically cheaper to go and do those vacations. So we were very blessed from that. But one time when the kids were still small and we made a decision like not to go and do that, to spend the money elsewhere. And so we did a vacation where it was a vacation for my wife where I took the children and we went on a camping. We went to a national park and went and did stuff and left my wife home alone to enjoy quiet. It was a vacation for both sides. Yeah, I know. Well, you know what it is. If you're taking your kids, it's a trip. If you're leaving your kids, it's a vacation. But
but I think it's really important, and this kind of comes across in business too. I think the more transparent you are, the more open you are, obviously within levels of appropriateness, right? But I think it is important that everybody kind of know what's going on and participate, because I think when everybody on the team participates financially, it makes more sense. People are more, conscientious, and I think they're better stewards of the project budget. And so I just think it's really important to educate them and to make them part of that.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I think, to wrap this up, like call to action around this. I like the tree analogy is perfect for this. Like if you're mid-project, you've not been doing it, start now. Schedule a budget sync. Talk with finance, talk with the team, talk about your burn rate, where you are against that scope of work, where you are against the actuals for the project, and say, hey, we're going to be adding in this component to the status reports. We're going to be discussing this. We want to make sure that with what we have remaining, what we think the burn rate will be against that for the remainder of the project, even if it's blown out the initial costs. So I think that there's never you're never too late, except when the project is completed and done. That might be too late. Yeah. But for any time the project's ongoing where you can start that. For new projects, build it into your structure. Go in and say, like, here is our weekly checkpoint on these days. These things are due. Here's who owns these things. I will hold you accountable for this. Adjust your schedules to deliver to this timeline, this schedule, of the status reports, checkpoints, go through. This is what it includes. And so I know both of us have used as an example when things are getting heated or messy, that the scope is exploded or whatever that is, where we've both incorporated the idea of these, like the daily stand-up meetings to get things structured and back under control. It's a great tool for getting that done. And employees hate it, absolutely hate it. But it's a great method to get people structured in their thinking and being very upfront. This is clinical in their approach. What do we have? What are we working on today? What's still in front of us? What are the next steps after that? What's our ETA for these steps? Who owns that? What are your blockers? What can I do to help unblock you from this? Who do you need me to chase down from the stakeholders to get their input? What's delaying you? Having that kind of conversation, it reframes people's thinking around how to do that. And which, Sharon, we need to do an episode on the stand-up meeting. Why that's missing.
About it, but I don't know that that's ever made it on our list.
I might move that up in the order. We might have to do this in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah. No, but I agree with you. I think, and I am not a fan of meetings for the sake of meetings. I'm really not. I think meetings serve a purpose. And I think a lot of times, so you kind of, what not to do, don't have meetings at all, because why not? Let's just let everybody roam free and do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I mean, I'm not saying that, people should have meetings back to back and be so busy they can't breathe. But truthfully, meetings do serve a purpose, right? They keep us on track. They keep us accountable. They keep us responsible.
We communicate. We're clear. Leverage best practices across, right? If you're sharing that, if you're giving that kind of visibility with the team, you might have peers. You might have direct reports that come in that have this other prior experience. Be like, this is the way that we used to do it at this company that worked really well. Here's what we did. Awesome. Let's adopt that. Let's do that.
Yeah. No, and I definitely think, people need to have time for work time, but I also think about it this way. So we talked about adding up how much you're paying for anybody to be in a meeting. So be really thoughtful about who needs to be in that call and what do they need to know, and understand that every single hour that people are working, you're paying for all those people. And so you have to really understand, like, where is that value going? So that helps you to really kind of wrap your head around, how you're managing that project and how the finances are being, communicated and managed and all of that as well.
Yep. Well, Sharon, a great discussion. A lot more we could go in and talk about.
So much more
stories, so much more around this. If you've not already following us, please be sure to follow us and subscribe. I know I've not been throwing up the banners. I've been so engaged in this. I've not had I guess let me throw up the banners here. It's like, you can follow us out on the socials. We're out there. Find us all over the place. Of course, you can find all past episodes out on YouTube right now under Buckley Planet. So we've got a location change for the videos that's coming up not too far in the future. We'll share some of our plans, some of what's going on. Like, we're here in the summer months now, and we've got some stuff going on. Maybe we'll trickle out some information next episode. But we're actually going to do an episode where we just talk about our plans for the show. So we'll do that in a couple of weeks as well.
Some insider sneak.
Insider, right. And of course, you can always go over to projectfailurefiles.com and sign up for the newsletter. And that's part of what's coming here with
Get on the list.
Lots going on there. So with that, Sharon, as always, great fun. We'll see you next Monday, same time, always, for the rest of our lives at 9 a.m. Pacific, every Monday, another episode. And I thought it'd be great to be able to talk about, like, here's what's next week, but I don't have it up in front of me. So you have to wait.
We'll see you next time.
You'll see the emails. So,
it'll be a surprise.
Yes. Surprise for all of us. Right. See you later.
Do you really?
I kind of want to know.
Me too.
I think, yeah.
Me too.